Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here. Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here.
A small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio,
your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Oh man, could it be? Is it true? Could Star Wars finally be heading back to the big screen? That's what Deadline and Hollywood Reporter are saying. That after months of speculation, I should say these are unconfirmed reports, and when I say unconfirmed, Kathleen Kennedy hasn't said anything about it yet, so there's probably a better shot of this movie coming to fruition than any of the things that she's announced, because it seems like that is the kiss of death. If she announces your project, then, you find out it's been backburnered. You've moved on to other projects. Who knows? But it's looking positive. It seems like there's momentum behind this Lindelof Star Wars film, and that it may actually grab that December 2025 slot in the Disney tentpole calendar, which made the rounds a week or so ago. It, went out like next 5 years and, insert Marvel movie number this, insert Star Wars that. But at least, they didn't come out and give it a title and officially name the director and the writer and do all of that hoopla, because that does have a chance of backfiring. But we'll break it all down. Some interesting things being posted online. Deadline got the scoop and the exclusive, but others have followed up, and we'll talk about all of that. Plus, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni talking to Entertainment Tonight, providing some project updates. We'll have highlights. And Hayden Christensen, this is amazing news when you think about the ride that Hayden Christensen has had in his career at Star Wars. He got an award. He got one of the Saturn Awards for playing Anakin Skywalker. Best guest performance by an actor. That just happened a little while ago. We've got a clip of his acceptance speech. So it's going to be a really great show. Plus, we'll be listening to some voicemail and some emails and hearing what your thoughts on the current state of Star Wars, including Andor. I'm sure we'll be talking about that and so much more here on Rebel Force Radio. Great to be with you. And of course, all those great audio clips that we'll be sharing with you are courtesy of one man, and his name is my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Yeah, we come packing with the audio. We got your audio highlights right here. It is, after all, an audio format of entertainment, so let's use it and abuse it tonight. And the subject matter, of course, is the wars. Had a great time on the Andor after show this week. What a great episode that was. I really loved the whole prison environment.
Yeah.
And what could be considered something of a filler of an episode that we had this week was just made great by the intrigue of the entire setup with the prison. And we know there's going to be a prison break coming soon, probably next week. So I'm really looking forward to that.
You know why I think
there's no filler
it wasn't so much filler? I think it's because they gave us so much detail. When you talked about the prison,
yeah.
I think the detail really helped carry the plot along, what little plot there was really in that episode.
Right. And we have to look at these arcs as arcs. We really do. And that's the way that I think we'll be evaluating this show once it's all wrapped up. And we can look at it as one big story about a year in this guy's life, starting with the moment he kills some cops and ending with what I believe will be his full-fledged enrollment in the Rebel Alliance. But we'll see. Maybe that won't come until season 2. I think we talked about that on the show this week. Somebody brought that up. how he won't have that full transformation. He could possibly end up still in prison by the time the season ends. I don't see that happening. No.
Yeah.
No, I think we'll be meandering if we get into that territory. But I think we'll see full evolution of his character as a rebel happen this month, and I'm looking forward to breaking them all down on the after show. But the weekly Force Cat.
Jinx. It's only been 9 years.
How did I do that? You know, it may have been I was accessing a folder of older audio and just the title of that show
Folks,
burned into my brain.
You have no idea how much hopping around Jimmy Mack does in a day, from one gig to the next gig. He was just saying before, he goes, I don't know what show I'm working on. I've got folders open. I'm logged into multiple Dropboxes. So I can forgive him. We can forgive him, of course.
Yeah, my mind is a salad bar that got toppled over and is spilled out onto the floor. Don't slip on the dressing.
The weekly RFR.
And of course, the weekly RFR. Of course, everyone knows that Jason originated the Force Cast back in 2006. That show was his brainchild. And I jumped on board that sucker not long after I first heard it because I knew a good thing. Here we are now, all these years later. We had to go independent in 2013. We felt it would be appropriate with the horizon filled with so many cool Star Wars projects. I never thought we'd have a year as busy as we've had this year with Star Wars, with the 3 streaming shows and the Star Wars Celebration Convention and other conventions and other releases. Yikes, it's been busy. Even like Tales of the Jedi was a big whoop-de-doo. So we're riding the Andor wave out until the rest of the year here on Rebel Force Radio. Yes. Not the Force Cat.
All right. Well, how about we kick things off with a little listener correspondence? We got a voicemail. We got an email here. So let's do it.
Okay.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message, Doctor, the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
All right, we're going to start with email here from Jared. Jared says, Chut, fellas. I've been going back and listening to some of the RFR Filoni interviews, and I came across an interesting discussion you both had with Dave during your visit to Lucasfilm HQ back in 2014. I think it sheds a bit of light on the topic of current Star Wars canon that came up during last week's The Tales of the Jedi after show. Around the 29-minute mark of the August 8th, 2014 RFR podcast, Jimmy brings up the topic of the, quote, cleaning of the slate when it comes to Lucasfilm declaring old EU as legends and everything moving forward is canon. Dave, as he always does, takes a deep breath and dives deep. So let's listen to the clip from Dave Filoni.
If we say this is all canon, then as creatives now on the cinematic universe, we have to more than ever read this stuff and stay up with it, and Story Group does, so that we know and are respecting those things. Because the minute that we go back into a world of, well, I know it was that way in the book, but this makes better sense as a movie, well, then it didn't matter anyway, right? So we've invalidated it all again.
So if we're playing profit or loser on this one, I think Dave scores 1 for profit, although we probably didn't realize it at the time that he would be the one doing the invalidating. I guess my point is that Lucasfilm never should have drawn the line in the sand, and listening to Dave talk here, it seems like he agrees. For him, it was always what came from George can be considered canon. All else is source material, because at some point, the storytellers in the film TV medium of Star Wars will end up contradicting something from a comic or novel in order to tell the story they want to tell. Thanks for all you do. May the Force be with you, Jared.
Do you think that Filoni is invalidating the idea of combining all the different mediums into one big story? Do you think he's invalidating that in that statement?
I don't think so. But then again, I'm not really the best judge because I'm not as steeped in the tie-in material as others. In the since they did wipe the slate clean and declare everything prior to the Disney takeover Legends, I'm not aware of any major dust-ups like we were getting, certainly we were getting during the era of the Clone Wars and people really being upset about the direction that Filoni was taking the Mandalorians. You also had, the Republic Commandos by Karen Travis, and those novels were being overturned. I mean, she even really kind of took a stand herself, thinking she had ownership to some degree of the IP, and she had a lot of fans. So it's nothing compared to that. But then again, I'm not as steeped as some are, and I'm sure that there have been inconsistencies. But I don't think they're going out of their way. I don't think they're brazen about it, like maybe they were before.
I think what Jared specifically is talking about is the Tales of the Jedi show. And a lot of people have been talking about how Filoni's final episode of that, which featured Ahsoka living as a farmer, hiding out, that whole sequence sort of invalidated everything that happened in E.K. Johnson's book, Ahsoka. So that's where I think we're coming from, as far as the perspective of hearing that quote, which I think we should probably hear again with that in mind, and think about the fact that a lot of people are a little frosted that Dave has taken liberties with Ahsoka's story outside of what happened in the Ahsoka novel. Now, my personal viewpoint on this whole situation is anything that has to do with Ahsoka's story that should be considered canon comes directly from Dave Filoni. And the Ahsoka novel was said to be based on Filoni ideas and scripts or what have you for things that he wanted to do with the character beyond the Clone Wars, or beyond where the Clone Wars was canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, there was a slew of books and comics that were said to be based on outlines or scripts for unused Clone Wars stories.
Yes.
Dark Disciple comes to mind. The what was the one called? Son of Dathomir or something like that.
Yeah.
I told the story about how Darth Maul survived or how he escaped being held in captivity by the Emperor, Palpatine. I guess he would have been the Chancellor then.
Yeah.
But so Filoni's the one now. Filoni's the one who is invalidating expanded universe stuff.
Well, it's his own character when it comes to Ahsoka.
My point. Yep.
And number two, I mean, how many people you think read that Ahsoka novel? Maybe
many, but I don't think it compares to how many people are watching Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah, I was going to say, so Disney Plus has about 152 million subscribers worldwide. I would be willing to bet that maybe a couple 100,000 people read that Ahsoka novel. And that's certainly not, look, what Jared's pointing out isn't whether this is right or wrong. He's asking, is this happening? Is this phenomena happening? And I thought it was at the time a mistake for them to do exactly what Jared was pointing at, because they didn't learn their lesson with the old expanded universe. When you have an aggressive publishing schedule, you have multiple comics and you have paperback lines and you have hardbacks, and you're trying to crank out dozens of titles in a year. There's no way. And on top of that, you're trying to do dozens of hours of television a year, both in animated form and live action form with Disney Plus. Now we're talking about, Star Wars coming back to the big screen. I don't know how you can sustain that much writing, that much storytelling, and have it all tie together. I think they're going to have to pick their priorities. And I don't know why, after watching, how, Star Wars nearly drowned under its own canon in the old EU days, I don't know why Disney would step into that mess again. Here we are 10 years later, and we've got the same problem. It took the old EU longer than that took it more like 20, 25 years before it finally collapsed. But they're not leaving these creatives any room if they're going to be beholden to a comic or a book that a couple 100,000 people at best worldwide read.
Yeah. I think the numbers situation is the best thing to point at. Why pacify an audience that is a mere fraction of what you're capable of grabbing at via streaming series? That makes a lot of sense to me, but it still doesn't help the fans of those particular books who are fed the bill of goods.
That's right.
That all of the canon will connect to one another. Now, somebody brought up a good way of looking at how these stories are told. And you can look at it like the four books of the New Testament in the Bible, where you have, or the four books of the gospel, I should say.
Right.
Where you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who all told their stories. But all of them sort of differ from one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're hearing different perspectives of the gospel of Star Wars, and I think that's the best way to look at it.
I think it's a great way to look at it. As long as the big keystone events are consistent, it's not like Matthew said that Christ died on a cross, and Mark was saying that he was killed in a stampede of buffalo or something like that. I mean, you have to have the big moments be consistent. And it sounds like this is a relatively small issue when it comes to Ahsoka.
It is, because they're very similar stories.
Yeah.
The one told in the novel and the one told in Tales. And that's because I think Dave Filoni offered the foundation for the story to publishing. And then E.K. Johnson ran with it for the Ahsoka novel. But Filoni has now come back to that idea and realized he may have new avenues in which he can tell that story the way he sees it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's not going to go back and read the Ahsoka book and go, oh, does this match up with he's on these planes flying back and forth from Northern California to the LA area. And I know it's a quick flight, but Tales, those were quick shorts. So
right.
It kind of adds up, that's an hour-long flight. I know he didn't write these stories on just, one flight alone, but that's kind of where the evolution for this all happened. And so Dave, he wants to expand the Ahsoka story. He's way deep into Ahsoka now, because they're shooting the live action series. So,
something that occurred to me as I was it came when I was looking at some news of some new action figures that were coming out, Star Wars action figures. And I looked at, the releases and I go, God, they just put that out. They just put that figure out. And I went and I looked, it was like, yeah, they did.
Maddening.
But like 8 years ago in one case. And I was really upset about it because to me, it feels like yesterday. I mean, especially when you've been at this as long as you have, as long as I have. So there is a tendency for us as fans that have been through this, or, in this for 40 plus years. And time is so relative sometimes to our age, our experience, what's going on in our life. I forget that there's somebody that just started collecting Star Wars figures 3 or 4 years ago that wants that character, that wants that figure, and this is their chance for them to get. And I think that is something that we're going to have to take into account, not just with merchandise, but also with some of the storytelling, is that if we hold everybody to the letter of everything that's been said over the last 45 years, we're going to come up short and we're going to be disappointed. So I think that as Star Wars ages, we're going to have to be a little more flexible than to hold them to every dotted I and every crossed T and all of this tie-in material. My God, Jim, we've had to be flexible just within the realm of the live action universe, within the films themselves. There's, minor contradictions. Maybe some might even say large contradictions. So,
as a fan, for me, sometimes part of the fun is making these contradicting stories fit.
Right.
So, and it can be done. It can be done. If you just want to use your own imagination, you can connect the dots. And the way that the Tales short differed from the novel is, it's massive to some people because in that novel, it featured AHSOKA building her white lightsabers to take on an Inquisitor.
Mm-hmm.
So she takes on an Inquisitor and everything, but it's just the way it all kind of comes together is a different fashion of a story. But it's still putting AHSOKA out there, calling herself Ashla, living as a farmer, having fellow farmers figure out she's a Jedi, having the Empire act against the farming villagers and burn down their village and all. I mean, all of that stuff is there. It's just the way it all kind of unravels is quite a bit different.
The analogy that you draw about, the Gospels or any kind of sacred texts with different interpretations, I think it's a great metaphor. I really do.
Yeah. So instead of being mad that one story contradicted another, just be happy we're getting more stories.
You remember when the Genndy series came out and it showed the Jedi doing all these crazy things, and I think it was George himself that sort of made the comparison to Tall Tales, legends. When Mace Windu in that episode really just tears into all of those troopers, the only eyewitness is a little boy. And so it was really
up
easy.
On a hill,
yeah, it was easy to say, well, that's how he remembers it, So I think there's room. Actually, we've got a voicemail from Gavin in Omaha that has I think a similar take. He's talking about the different tones and the different points of view in Star Wars.
Jason, Jimmy, this is Gavin from Omaha. Currently walking home from my buddy's house after watching the latest episode of ANDOR, episode 9. Great episode. I just been listening to the Tales of the Jedi after show and also reading stuff online. I'm hearing a lot of people wondering how ANDOR could be in the same universe as Tales of the Jedi or, the speeder bike chase from Book of Boba Fett and just all these things, how they can be in the same universe. But it got me thinking, in our universe, we, here on Earth, we live in the same universe where war and death and slavery exist or existed in the past. And that's the same universe as my little sister's 6th birthday party, with rainbows and fun and laughter. And so, they're completely different tones, war and birthday parties, but that they're in the same universe. And so I don't know why Star Wars can't have 2 different flavors of genre in their same universe when in our universe we have plenty. So just wanted to leave that hopefully that's some food for thought, but thanks guys for all you do. Love you.
Oh, thanks, Gavin. Right back at you. Jim, I like this idea because you do sometimes have to stop yourself every once in a while and be grateful. Maybe you are, maybe it is your kid's birthday party or you're on vacation with your family and you're operating in the same world as those that are literally starving or in the throes of civil war. And so just like our real world has different points of view, and different takes, different happenings, so can Star Wars. So Cassian Andor's journey through a galaxy far, far away is going to look and feel very different from Obi-Wan Kenobi's journey. Makes sense to me.
There's a reason I'm a baseball fan, and that's because I love watching guys hit 90 to 100 mile an hour fastballs out of the park. And I like to see the slick play. I like to see the speed on the bases. I like to see guys who can throw pitches in a way that you don't think a human could possibly do. These are all the things I love to see. I don't go to a baseball game to watch a guy kick a ball into a goal or perform a slam dunk into a hoop. And these are the certain elements of Star Wars. When you talk about lightsabers and Jedi and droids and aliens and stuff, these are the things that immerse me in this other place. These are the things that draw me to Star Wars and allow me and allow my imagination the affordability to remove me from planet Earth and put me somewhere else. And I don't want those elements to be forgotten or thrown away. Now, the great thing about Andor is it's brilliant when it comes to the writing, the acting, the direction, the way, I mean, everything that makes TV great is there in Andor. But there are elements of Star Wars that are missing from it. So Andor at times, to me, plays off as something like a mundane HBO drama that could be in a contemporary earthy time period, especially those episodes in the forests and stuff. As beautiful as Scotland is and as great as the photography was for all of that, it was still very earthbound. And so I made observations about that and was critical about it, but it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the series and the fact that I can make it Star Wars because I'm so immersed in Star Wars all the time anyway, because I've seen every film 500 times. I've read every comic. I've read every novel. Going into the prequels, I had the flexibility. I think a lot of my fellow fans, contemporaries, guys my age who grew up with the original trilogy, but they never dabbled in the comics or the novels or anything like that. But they still considered themselves to be major Star Wars fans. They couldn't accept the prequels and they hated it because it was so different. To them, it wasn't Star Wars. To me, it felt like a very natural expansion of what we'd seen before. But instead of presented through the lens of a film of the 70s or 80s, we're seeing it through the lens of a film of the late 90s, early 2000s, which was incredibly expansive for the saga, but people didn't get on board with that. And I really think that it's because they were so locked into the universe as presented in the original trilogy. So when people say, well, Andor isn't giving me the Star Wars that I want, I sympathize for them. I understand where they're coming from. And I just wish that they had the flexibility I have as a fan to see different elements of the Star Wars universe. But to many, Star Wars is a very specific certain thing. And you know it when you see it. And anyone can admit, without being a hater, without being toxic or critical or whatever label you want to put on them, anyone could admit by watching Andor that it looks vastly different from any other Star Wars show. It removes a lot of the Star Wars elements purposefully, and they have been broadcasting that with big, bold headlines about how this is a breath of fresh air and something that the franchise always needed. And so when I hear people say, well, you just want Jedi and lightsabers. Well, you know what? If we're talking about Star Wars, I guess I do. I guess I do.
Lock me
but I don't
up.
think, guilty as charged because I'm a Star Wars fan and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I also don't believe in fan service either. I mean, there's blatant examples of it, sure, but to maintain the integrity of everything, you have to steep it in the universe that has been created and built, and the foundation goes back 45 years. So I know I'm good cop, bad cop here. To bring it all back though, is that I don't think people should be dismissed for saying or even complaining that Andor doesn't have the proper Star Wars tropes and visual aesthetic that is essential to Star Wars. I don't blame people for saying that because I don't think the happy medium has been discovered. And I think they need to find it, because I do like the experiment of taking Andor so outside the Star Wars box. I really do like that. And I think it's a great show. I do. Do I think people are over exaggerating about the show a lot of times? Yeah, I do. On both sides of the spectrum. And I'm trying to present both sides of the spectrum here, you know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be just like right in the middle of it all, because I get it. I get what people are saying. And I wish that they would open themselves up to the show a little bit more and not look for all of the visual stuff that we love so much about Star Wars, and just try to wrap yourself up in the story, and you'll find there's more Star Wars in there than appears on the surface, because we carry a lot. We're like Yoda talking to Luke before he goes into the cave on Dagobah, and Yoda's like, your weapons, you don't need them. Luke doesn't listen. He just carries those weapons right in there because he's expecting something.
Yeah.
And when he doesn't get it, he strikes out. He strikes at it and fights against it. And I think that's what Star Wars fans are doing right now. The fan base that don't like Andor, they're kind of like Luke going into the Dagobah cave, and they see something and they slash at it, try to destroy it. But then the vision in the cave reveals itself, and all the questions are answered. Well, not really.
I think there are a lot of people. Here's the thing, not to get too introspective about RFR, but I one of the things that I appreciate so much about the freedom that this format and having done this for so long affords us is that we don't have to have the headline, or in our case, maybe the podcast episode description written before the show comes out. In other words, there are people that you just know because of whose voice it is that they're going to hate whatever it is that came out that has the Star Wars label on it. Or they're going to be sycophantic about it and say that it's the greatest thing since the last thing that came out. And what I love about our show and what we try to present is a very, it's certainly opinionated, but it's balanced. I think that it takes a lot of things into account, a lot of history. There's a lot of miles on our tires collectively and individually, certainly. And so we do like to look at things from a lot of different angles. We have our take. We don't really mince words. We say what we think. But it has become so polarizing, and I'm struggling to even figure out who the real fans of this show are, who the haters are, because, the way that I guess you could say the fan media has been talking about this franchise really since the sequel trilogy came out. So it doesn't seem to fit into the same boxes, although the people that, make names for themselves hating everything that Star Wars, even when it's intrinsically good, are still doing it. So anyway, I guess that's probably why a lot of you, I hope that's why a lot of you out there are listening to this show. We're not trying to have it both ways, but we're certainly trying to be a welcoming environment for all types of Star Wars fans, whether you love the sequels or hate the sequels or love Andor or hate Andor. And the beauty of the bounty that we have with Star Wars content is that, hey, if you don't like this thing, there's, always going to be something around the corner. Maybe you'll like Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll like Mando season 3. Maybe you'll like Bad Batch season 2. But Jim, I agree with you.
A great band can turn the corner and present a different type of album to their listening audience.
Oh yeah.
And some of the audience will go along for the ride, and somebody will be, I can't believe they sold out and they went country, and you know what I mean?
Dylan plugged in. What?
Bob Dylan is a great example to bring up, because he went through many, many phases of his career, and he had. It still is. He's still going. I mean, his career is longer than that of Star Wars, and he's gone through all the twists and turns that any performer can go through. And some the fan base, they love everything he does, and they'll stick with him no matter what he experiments with. And the other part of the fan base will be like, it's great, but he's not doing this, he's not doing that like he used to do. And where is that? But it still sounds like Bob Dylan, right? Yeah, right. So that's why I kind of came up with that just enjoy Star Wars mantra, because if we keep just picking it all apart so heavily, there's going to be nothing left. There really isn't going to be anything left. And then to go on what Jason's talking about with the people who make a sport out of hoping Star Wars fails, and they have the headline written before they've even seen the latest episode, and they're driven by some other motivation than being real with themselves about the entertainment they're consuming.
Yeah.
And I think we try to stay as real as possible, and try to present a balance. And that's all we do. People are like, oh, they're complaining again. Oh. It's like, no, these are all the growing pains you go through as a fan when the company gets sold to a major corporate entertainment giant, and then they make mistake after mistake. And it's not like it was smooth sailing before George sold Star Wars.
Oh my gosh! No, people were calling for his head. People wanted to get rid of their childhood. Yeah, it was time for him to hang it up. Childhood. Bring somebody else in. Well, you got your wish. How do you like it? Hey, let's have a little bit of fun. If you've been listening to the Andor after show, man, oh man, when that prison on NARKINA popped up, I just kept thinking about that classic Johnny Cash tune, Folsom Prison Blues. He recorded a live album from a prison once. I can't remember what that album was, the name of the prison. But anyway, Johnny Cash was just synonymous with hard living and, the plight of the working man that might have gotten mixed up on the wrong side of the law. And so we have a long history, Jim, on this show and the other show that we talked about earlier of putting the call out for song parodies. And our listeners are always super talented, and they don't disappoint. It's been a while since we threw one out there, but we did with Andor and the NARKINA 5 prison. I said, someone's got to put some new lyrics to the Folsom Prison Blues. And Rob O from Chicago did just that. I guess I'll play it. You have nothing to add.
I should say, everyone heard the version you did this week on the Andor After Show of the same song, different lyrics. So your lyrics were written by Jeff Ulickney. Right. But this is from Robbo from Chicago. He wrote these parody lyrics to the Johnny Cash song and performed them. So this is written by and performed by Robbo from Chicago.
I hear the shuttle coming, it's flying from the sky. Another poor soul caught in the wrath of the Empire's eye. A tourist down in the Amos is what I yelled and cried. But those shuttles keep on coming here in NARKINA 5.
Nice.
When I was on Canary, we had our wooden guns. Then Mama Marva found me and made me her new son. Well, I shot 2 guys from a brothel that led me on the run. Then Luthen came to find me to have a little fun. They're so fat and satisfied with their fancy little boots. Tungstoid steel is my demise, but damn isn't Vix cute. I guess I had it coming since Aldani's eye. At night in my own cell, I suck that food too dry.
Food tube.
Well, if they free me from this prison, then those shuttles would be mine. I join the rebels' cause, or maybe Saw Gerrera's my guy. far from this in prison. It's where I want to be. Well, maybe I'll bring Melshi down on a trip with me.
All right. That is
was
Robbo from Chicago with NARKINA Prison Blues. I love it.
Finally, somebody paying tribute to the food tube.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, we have barely even discussed the food tube on the show. That's a weird feature of that cell.
That really
You
is.
get the food tube, and then if your table wins, you get flavor. I wonder what kind of flavor you get. I guess
I don't know, man. You ever had one of those real bad, well, when you had COVID, you had one of those real bad colds and food has no taste?
Yeah,
so it's just
right.
You got to eat because you got to live, but it has no taste. And even when it's tasteless, it tastes pretty bad.
Yeah.
Pretty rough.
You know, it's like the slop they have to eat on Big Brother when they lose the challenges. You know, you've been assigned slop for the week. So they give them this mixture of, it's a water and oats, and it's like an oatmeal.
Gruel is what it is. It's gruel.
Yeah, like gruel.
Please, may I have gruel? Please, sir.
Yeah, that's Andor sucking on the tube. Good job, Robbo from Chicago.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, well, we definitely have news. I think the jury's out whether it's good, but it's something. Deadline had the story. They broke the news that the next Star Wars film will most likely be the David Lindelof helmed untitled film. Excuse me, Damon Lindelof, pardon me. Damon Lindelof, and he's already, he's going to be writing the movie, and he's already chosen Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, who was the director of the Ms. Marvel series, at least a couple episodes of the Ms. Marvel series. And
that's all she's really done.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been a long time Pakistani filmmaker. So she's got the Bollywood thing happening. So she's no stranger to filmmaking. But really, the only impact she's had here in America is as director of a couple episodes of Ms. Marvel. So this is, to me, a big leap of faith to hand her the next Star Wars film. Think of the directors we've had over the years. George Lucas or Irving Kershner, who was outside of the box choice as director. Obviously, Richard Marquand, very outside the box choice as a director, but almost George was ghost directing Return of the Jedi, if you really want to dig deep into that. Then we get into the prequel era, all Lucas. Then we get into the sequel era, where you have J.J. Abrams, you have Ron Howard, you have Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
You have who am I leaving out? I'm leaving out someone. Oh, well, Gareth Edwards / Tony Gilroy.
Look, yes, the names that I thought of. Look, when you talk about, someone like Chinoy, Sharmeen, the names that come to my mind are Gareth Edwards, Lord and Miller, Colin Trevorrow, the ones that got the rug pulled out from under them because they were the flavor of the month. They were considered up-and-comers. They didn't come with a huge price tag. I think that, I don't want to take anything away from her, but I mean, she's not. And I think it's really hard to compare when George was at the helm. Return of the Jedi proved that you could make a pretty great Star Wars film, even if you didn't have a great director, if George was hanging around, looking over the shoulder, and as you say, even, ghost directing the film. But this feels to me like history repeating itself, where you pick somebody brand new. I mean, look at Patty Jenkins, and that movie's been put on ice. The only thing that this has going for it, Jim, which I mentioned at the top, is that this has yet to be announced by Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy has not said a word about it. Disney's not said a word about it. Meanwhile, Deadline had the exclusive. Hollywood Reporter had a follow-up talking about the whole writer's room. There's a whole secret writer's room that convened after Star Wars Celebration in the summer.
Why do they keep saying that after Star Wars Celebration in all of the reports?
I don't know.
Why do they keep
Why is it a benchmark?
specify? Is that where these people all met? Why is that? Why couldn't they just say they met over the summer? Why does it always have to be after Star Wars Celebration? Something happened at Star Wars Celebration to bring these people together, clearly. But that doesn't get reported anywhere.
No.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to point that out.
No, it's interesting. I wondered that too. It's like, why is that an important benchmark? I suppose you could say, well, maybe what they're implying is that Star Wars Celebration would have been a great time to announce this if they were going to announce this this dream team or this team of people. But you're right. Maybe this is when the deal was cemented or they all met. But they got together. Now, Lindelof's writing partner is going to be Justin Britt Gibson. And I'm not familiar with his work either. Guillermo del Toro's vampire series, The Strain. I didn't see any of that. Also, the Stars Channel, The Counterpart was a series. Justin's a young guy. No question about that. So he's going to be co-writing. In fact, since this meeting in the summer, they've been typing away, according to reports. Interestingly, you also had Patrick Somerville, who worked with Lindelof on Leftovers, and then Raina McClendon. She's a consulting producer on. She was a consulting producer on Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and also a writer on the Willow series. So she's hanging out there. Andy Greenwald, who is the creator of the Rosario Dawson drama Briar Patch. And last but not least, guess who else was there? Dave Filoni was hanging out with these writers. So that's an interesting one. I mean, Dave Filoni almost taking on sort of, it doesn't credit him as this, but I'm assuming he wasn't there to pitch ideas as much as he was there to probably listen to ideas and pitches. I can't imagine Jim Dave being in a position where he's on a level playing field with all these upstarts when it comes to Star Wars, throwing ideas around.
Well, he is the executive creative director at Lucasfilm.
That's his new title, right? Yes.
Yeah. So as an executive, this might be a project he's shepherding. And that's a good sign, obviously, to have somebody with Dave's stature and history with Star Wars to be involved. Or maybe he just brought them all together. But Filoni's fingerprints will be on this. Now, we know that doesn't always mean instant success for Star Wars. Dave has a great track record, learning at the feet of George Lucas, creating Clone Wars, spinning it off into Rebels, which was super successful. The Mandalorian, outstanding. But we also have on Dave's resume things like Star Wars Resistance and didn't he have something to do with those the Destiny animated
Forces
shorts
of Destiny?
But those don't even count. Don't even count. But Resistance does. That was a full-fledged series for 2 seasons, and it sucked a duck. Now, I know there are fans out there, and that's fine. I mean, the holiday special sucked a duck, and I'm a fan of that. So, but Filoni as executive, he's a guy there that can make things happen at Lucas. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more things pass through him in its very early stages, or maybe Dave is going to stay on as some sort of executive with this, because he hasn't really worked in feature films. He did work as part of the creative crew, the Visionaries, who worked on things like The Force Awakens. He was invited to the set by Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy to see The Last Jedi as that was being shot. And then he segued into The Mandalorian with Faverau. So he has been on film sets. He has worked with the creatives on film. but he has not actually worked on a film project yet, really, like as the guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the next step forward for Filoni. So this is his first maybe really great opportunity to delve into feature filmmaking. What I think Lucasfilm should do with Star Wars and feature films is I think they should make a Mandalorian movie. I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean,
the details get a little shakier even because despite the fact that rumors are that inside Disney, they realize that the sequel trilogy did not leave the mark that they intended to. Okay. They realized that was a misfire.
They bailed on the sequel trilogy. Let's really get underneath the hood here and see what's going on. They bailed on this sequel trilogy once the television stuff started going into production. Once The Mandalorian started to take off in production in that time period between The Last Jedi and the release of The Rise of Skywalker. At some point in that time period, the Star Wars sequel trilogy was made a low priority. And then very much validated by the time The Mandalorian was released a month before The Rise of Skywalker to an incredible embrace by the fans and the media and the casual fans and just anybody. And then there was also the curious notion that, this Disney Plus, it's a new streaming thing. What's this all about? So it was just like the perfect opportunity for The Mandalorian. And while all this is happening, the poor sequel trilogy just gets completely abandoned. And that film, The Rise of Skywalker, put the sequel trilogy on the vine to die. And that was all by design. That was all by design. This thing that they built up after all these years, and Rey and Finn and Poe, these guys are left on the sidelines now.
Yeah,
totally on the sidelines.
I think some of them are about to be brought back into the game because
I would hope so.
Sources are saying
investment.
Yeah, sources are saying that this Lindelof film is going to bring in some of the character. First of all, it's going to take place post Rise of Skywalker. It's likely going to be a standalone. At least it's going to be constructed as a standalone, though, we know if it's successful, it could have sequels. But they're not going into it saying we're going to make a trilogy or a duology or anything like that. It's going to be one standalone film. Will take place after the events of Rise of Skywalker. Will not be a continuation of the Skywalker saga, but it will feature some of the characters from the Disney trilogy, the Disney sequel trilogy. What does that mean? Who could it be? Could it be Poe? Could it be Finn? I don't know. Could it be Babu Frick? We don't know who it could be. It's likely not going to be Rey.
Mandalorian.
Yeah, right. It's not going to be Rey because she's Rey Skywalker, so we're not going to continue the Skywalker saga. So there's enough of that. But here's
does that eliminate Rey from feature films because they don't want to continue? But yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. This heavily publicized end of the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
Where does Rey fit into all that? Because she does claim the name at the end.
Right.
So you can say that the saga does not continue beyond that moment. Then is Rey really a Skywalker anyway? Doesn't Rey have to go out and reveal her Skywalker-ness to the galaxy after claiming the name? I say absolutely she does.
Oh, I think so too. You can't just say I'm a Skywalker.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't just say it and then retire. I mean, it doesn't work that way. With boxing, I always hated it when the champ would retire after he wins the belt. The guy, he fights, and he finally wins the belt, and he's going to retire. He's not going to take on any challengers for that.
Oh, you retire as champ.
That's a paper champion. It's not a real champion. And you have to defend your title to prove your championness. And so I need Rey to prove her Skywalkerness. Will she have the opportunity now that the Skywalker saga has ended? And I don't like calling it the Skywalker saga. I really don't. But I mean, if Star Wars is going to be spreading out into all these different areas, and that's what it's going to be. But is it the Luke Skywalker era, or is it the Skywalker era of all Skywalker? Then why does Rey claim the name? What significance does that even have if there's no follow-up?
Well, but look at it this way. They wanted to close the chapter, close the book on the Skywalker saga. So, and I think they also realized that the characters in the sequel trilogy didn't have the traction, the staying power that other characters have had throughout the history of Star Wars. So what they do is they put that bookend on the end. Rey claims herself a Skywalker. Boom, over. And then when they don't pick up on Rey's story, they say, well, of course we didn't. We told you this is the end of the Skywalker saga. So it builds them out. It builds them out. So it's very curious. There's a lot curious about this Lindelof movie. One thing that's curious is how this thing got fast-tracked, or how this has more momentum than Patty Jenkins, than Taika Waititi, than Rian Johnson. And this is coming out of nowhere. Yeah, I know. Of course it has more momentum than those other projects because, one, the Rian Johnson trilogy is not going to happen. I don't think the Patty Jenkins Rogue Squadron movie is ever going to happen. It's backburnered.
No. The movie could happen.
But not under Patty Jenkins.
Patty wouldn't be attached. There would be no Patty attached. And I don't think the movie will happen.
Yeah. And as far as Taika goes, they caught up with him a couple months ago, and he goes, yeah, I still haven't written anything, but yeah, I'm thinking of ideas. I got ideas. Well, you know what? I have ideas for a Star Wars movie, too. But I don't think the Jason Swank-helmed Star Wars film is any closer. But this came out of seemingly nowhere. It comes out of nowhere, and it continues the timeline from Rise of Skywalker onward, despite the fact that in the halls of Disney, they realized that it didn't land. There is an article, a great piece by a former Hollywood Reporter writer. His name is Matthew Bologna. And right now he's writing for Puck News. And he does an analysis of a lot of this. And the headline is, "The next Star Wars movie terrifies Lucasfilm." And he says, no continuing storylines, no new characters worth following, several top-tier creators hired and then discarded, and little overarching creative vision. Lucasfilm was continuing to churn out a mixed bag of competently made and highly watched series for Disney+, but on the film side, the franchise was essentially dormant, and at least to me, Kathleen Kennedy's stewardship was a stunning example of IP mismanagement. So, he talks about, Gareth Edwards, Lord Miller, Colin Trevorrow, Rian Johnson, the Game of Thrones guys. The list goes on and on about these start-stops. But the point that he goes on to make here is he says, I'm told, and this is the big takeaway, I'm told Kennedy was advised by Disney to stop announcing projects and creative partners, lest the ravenous nerd press, as apparently we're being referred to in the hallowed halls, the nerd press pounce when those projects don't actually happen, as in the case frequently at Lucasfilm. Remember that hokey video with Jenkins in a flight suit that played at Disney's Investors Day in 2020? Yes. Or the triumphant press releases about new trilogies from The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson? Yeah, we all remember that. So maybe
November
the secret is
2018. No, 2017. November 2017. That's how long ago that was.
The Johnson press release.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And even on the show, we're like, wow, man, that's pretty ballsy that they're making this announcement before his first Star Wars film is released. They must have a lot of confidence in that Last Jedi movie.
To me, it's all emotion. It was decisions that I feel like were not based on sound, business, or creative ideas, but emotion and relationships. And we all really got along, and we just liked Ryan so much. I get along with my golden retriever, but I don't want him making a Star Wars movie.
Or at least you want to see how his first Star Wars movie is received before you give him 3 more.
Right.
And that's what happened. They didn't wait to see how the film was received, and they gave him 3 more. Do I think we'll never see Rian Johnson's trilogy? Absolutely. Do I think we'll never see a Rian Johnson Star Wars film or project? I'm not so sure about that, as long as Kathleen Kennedy is still at Lucasfilm. Because as you said, Jason, they really did enjoy working together. The whole process of The Last Jedi was this like wonderful.
It was a love fest.
Look at Kathleen Kennedy's IMDb. I believe she said The Last Jedi was the most fulfilling and satisfying film project she'd ever worked on. And this is a woman who worked on all of the Indiana Jones films, E.T., Schindler's List. I mean, so many incredible classic films.
Sure.
And and that's the one.
Yes. She got craft services out there on time for all those crews on all those films, man. I mean, she really
hey, that could make or break a film project, okay?
Right.
You have no idea how important that is. My God. But still, I mean, anyone could do that.
Going back to Matthew's story, this is something we'll see if, Jim, if you agree with this. He says, it is accepted internally that the last trilogy, and especially Rise of Skywalker, was rushed to meet aggressive release dates, and Kennedy played it safe in every possible way, choosing fan service and franchise management over creative swings. Look at her decisions, from jettisoning most of the original writer Michael Arndt's ideas and essentially remaking A New Hope with The Force Awakens, to freaking out and bringing back director J.J. Abrams and the villainous Emperor for Rise of Skywalker after some fans complained about Johnson's mythology-busting choices in Last Jedi, choices that Kathleen Kennedy had enthusiastically supported right up until she didn't. And I disagree with some of his points here because he's sounding to me like a big Rian Johnson fan, but the one area where I will agree is if it was such a love fest, and if they did have such a great working relationship, and if Rian Johnson should be the steward of another Star Wars trilogy, then why did Kathleen Kennedy support J.J. Abrams in walking back so much of what Rian did with The Last Jedi? It had to go back to Kathleen Kennedy.
That's a really good question. And, a lot of this is being laid at Kathleen's feet. But, I think she's also a victim of a lot of Disney corporate overreach. I think Bob Iger was extreme. The guy mentions it in his article, the aggressive release dates for the Star Wars films. I mean, heck, this guy was announcing release dates the same day George signed the papers.
Right.
It's like, well, wait a second, hold up. You don't really have it together enough to even be announcing that, but it doesn't matter. Let's just slap the Star Wars name on anything. And
do you think though, at that time, Jim, that Iger was thinking about those Lucas treatments? At that point, he was probably thinking, wait, we've got the makers' story treatments for a trilogy, so we should be able to crank these things out. It was later where Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams decided this wasn't what the story they wanted to tell.
Or maybe it was J.J. Abrams.
Or J.J., right.
Kathleen seems to want to facilitate everyone and get the talent, what they need to get the job done, and while still keeping her corporate overlords, then Bob Iger, now Bob Chapek, keep them satisfied, and the board of directors at Disney and all that stuff. I think this is kind of... we look at, Lucasfilm is screwed up and Kathleen Kennedy makes all these mistakes and stuff. But I mean, look at Hollywood in general these days. It's a mess.
Yes.
The whole thing is a mess. Hollywood is so broken. So, I mean, do you think George Lucas would have it any easier if, say, Disney buys Star Wars and Lucasfilm? When you say, George, you could stay on and run the whole thing. Do you think he'd have it any easier?
He would have lasted about 5 minutes. He would never.
He did last 5 minutes, and he bailed. Everyone says they just didn't use his stuff, but they still wanted to keep George around.
That is true. The way
they handled everything with him was so messed up. He walked away. George could have fixed the sequel trilogy, folks. He could have tweaked it, to his liking if he was willing to work and collaborate with others and their visions that they were bringing to the table. Guys like J.J. Abrams, guys like Lawrence Kasdan.
Mm-hmm.
These are guys like Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, it seemed like there were too many voices at the table. And that's probably what ruined the sequel trilogy. And that's what's ruining Hollywood in general these days, are these committees that are running these films for clueless corporations who don't have a creative bone in their body.
Yep. Yeah.
So all they know
I'm
how to
with
do is
you.
make superhero films.
I'm with
Superhero
you.
films, franchise films. They can't even do that right.
Yeah, it's time for the corporations to get out of the creativity business. Let the artists and the creatives, look, you can bankroll them, but let them make the movies that they want to do, unfiltered. Stop worrying about offending everybody. Stop worrying about being the epitome of inclusivity, because all it does is make a watered down, vanilla, homogenized waste of time where you say a lot but not anything at all.
Right.
There's no risk taking anymore.
You can't be an artist while still being the moral epicenter of the universe.
Right.
And that's what all these corporations try to do. Lord knows that's what the Disney Corporation tries to do with every single thing they touch. And that's why it gets so homogenized and broken down to where there is no artistry in film anymore.
No.
Not at all. If you want to point at a Star Wars film and say that's artwork, you're nuts, because it goes through it goes through the ringer, man. And it sucks all of the artistry out. Now, I mean, I don't mean to take anything away from all the great like visual effects artists that work on Star Wars, the sound guys, the soundtrack people, the composers, the actors. I mean, they're all doing their craft. I mean, they're all bringing what they know how to bring to it. But at the end, it's a big
for the
thing
most part. I mean, even when we talk about
people,
Jim, even when we've talked about, the flesh-colored, the pink flesh-colored aliens that we've seen since the Disney takeover, the lack of Star Warsiness in Andor, really all that they've done is they've taken George's boldness that really reached fever pitch in the prequel trilogy. The colors, the exotic designs. Yeah, some of them were misses,
Ben Quadraneros.
Okay, some of them are misses, like Ben Quadraneros. But with every
I
Ben
remember
Quadraneros,
Katie Lucas said to Kyle once, she's like, "That's the guy that you're making all this noise about, that guy?" And this is George Lucas's daughter.
Right.
She's like, "That's the guy?" She couldn't understand it. But I mean, it was a joke,
Yeah, it was a joke. But the point is that George took risks and George was bold. And so a lot of what he did became you just take it for granted. Yeah, stormtroopers ride on giant lizards. That was really weird at one time, but now we look at it and we don't even bat an eye. So sometimes things land, sometimes they don't. But that's the beauty of the artist in George, the great storyteller that is George, the world builder. But what I've seen since 2012 is things getting watered down. There's not bright, bold colors. Everything is pale pastels in Disney Star Wars. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, but I do miss the boldness of it. And George was bold. And you're pointing to the cause. Exactly. It's systemic in Hollywood. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And while Star Wars was run by a guy who was pretty stubborn about his way, and he wasn't going to let trends or flavors of the week affect him.
No.
That really protected the integrity of the Star Wars we came to know and love up until 2012. And there are still guys there, Faverau, Filoni, they worship what George has done for Star Wars. And it's their goal to maintain the integrity of Star Wars. Then you have guys at Lucasfilm who are on the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. Tony Gilroy, Ryan Johnson to a degree. You know, I mean, George was so involved with everything that was on the screen.
Right.
From every single droid and alien, he would go through that maquette shop and he would approve and he would mix and match the head to this guy, to the body of that guy, and all that. It all had his like personal touch on it. I don't think Star Wars has that anymore. I think that Neil Scanlon's Creature Shop just does whatever they want. And they just plop down all of these really kind of boring looking aliens when you compare them to what has come in the past.
You know, I'm glad you brought
guys
that
like
up.
Stuart Freeborn, Rick Baker, and all that. It's Neil Scanlon. They got to flush that guy out of Lucasfilm with an enema because he's not bringing it, and he's just left to run unfettered with these really boring looking aliens.
Boring designs.
I brought up that one alien that just has that flat face, and he's got a couple of little wobblies under his chin and stuff.
Yeah.
All over the sequels.
Yep.
He's the only alien we've really seen in Andor up to this point. That's Neil Scanlon's favorite creature. Ello Asti was the first time we were introduced to that alien. And I could probably count 20 other times we've seen the same alien. Remember, he was complaining to the parking cops on Canto Bight. Well, I told them not to park here,
right.
but they parked
Same
here anyway.
design.
You know?
Yeah.
Same.
I call him
alien.
Asti Spumante. That's the guy. But
so,
you know, in Icons on Earth,
we're slotting this guy in front of the camera, and we're avoiding things like Greedos, Hammerheads, and Walrus Men. I mean,
here's the thing: if you remember in the Icons on Earth documentary, there was a scene where Rick Baker was talking about, and it was he was kind of insinuating that, you know, George kind of took a lot of his designs, you know, that he had made, and he, you know, maybe wasn't compensated much for them. But he also said that he personally didn't think that George had the best taste in the aliens that he was picking out, the masks that he was picking out. What did he pick out? He picked out a guy that looked like a wolf man. He picked out a guy that literally looked like a devil, where Baker thought he had some more, weird looking things that weren't so, maybe didn't look like something out of a Universal or Hammer horror film. But George was drawn to that. Like George knew that Wolfman, you're going to have a visceral reaction to Wolfman because we've grown up with images of a Wolfman or of a devil. So I think George knew exactly what he was doing because he was looking for characters and designs that you immediately got an impression of when you looked at them. You knew whether they were a bad guy, a good guy, cute and cuddly, you know, meant good for the most part. And that's the thing that's missing. Like I say, it's a difference between being, you know, bold versus, you know, bold colors versus pale pastels. And that's what we've got. I do want to mention
about Baker, though, from what I recall, they were really under the gun for those Cantina reshoots. They didn't really have a budget. And so things were just being grabbed, you know, just grabbed and repurposed from other films even.
Yes.
And the Wolfman was an odd choice. And I think I have heard Rick Baker say in the past that he was surprised that George went with the Wolfman, especially for that close-up shot, right? When the cantina is being introduced to us viewers.
Right.
Where you see him take a drink and then he growls. His eyes are glowing. Lack Sivrak is his name. Yes. Lack. But to George's credit, he kind of recognized the thing being sort of Wolfman-y, and
I think he
didn't
knew exactly
really want
what he was doing. He wanted things that were familiar but unfamiliar.
But he removed it for the special edition and replaced it with Ketwall, the Ketwall alien. So that's why I think George kind of walked that one back.
I'm kind of talking 1976 George. Not necessarily.
Well, like I said, he was just yeah. But I mean, and that's his thought process. Exactly what you were saying was to take the familiar, the things that we knew were terrifying, and drop them into that cantina.
Yeah,
and really make it seem like that's the place that Obi-Wan said you'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
There's a Wolfman in here.
I mean, there's a freaking Wolfman from the Universal. Can you believe it? I'm pretty sure it's Lon Chaney Jr. himself. Luke, stay away from the Wolfman. Luke. Luke.
Hey, so here's another thing that Matthew says, and I can't remember if we covered this or not, Jim. It's been a couple of weeks since we were here on the regular Rebel Force Radio, but Michelle Rejwan, she left. She was the senior VP under Kathleen Kennedy, and certainly one of Kathleen Kennedy's right hands. She left her position, and she's transitioning back into being a producer full-time. She's, I think, working on The Acolyte with Leslie Headland.
Yeah,
and
she has been.
There are others that are rumored, others in the Kennedy camp that are rumored to be transitioning into full-time producers and sort of leaving that those posts. He doesn't really come out and say that that means the writing is on the wall, because more obituaries have been written, about Kathleen Kennedy's tenure at Lucasfilm than, you can shake a stick at. But does that mean that everyone's jumping off the sinking Kathleen Kennedy ship?
No way.
Or is it just restructuring, corporate restructuring?
Yeah, I mean, with Michelle, when she joined Lucasfilm, she essentially was taking the job that Carrie Hart got flushed out of, the director of live action development. So Carrie Hart was the fall guy for The Last Jedi. I don't know why they need a fall guy for it. That thing made a ton of money, but somebody took the hit, and it was Carrie. She was replaced by Michelle Rejwan, essentially. They may have changed the title name or something, but it was essentially the same position, right? And I remember when she got appointed that position and the news broke and we talked about it on this show, I said, this is a case of meet the new boss, same as the old boss, as Roger Daltrey sang in the Who song so many years ago. We won't get fooled again. And Michelle lasted in that position just about as long as Carrie Hart did. But Michelle is staying with the company, as you said. She's going to continue to work on The Acolyte, which is pretty deep in production right now. And she probably also is working on the Indiana Jones film. So once those projects come and gone, I think, there could be a lot of interesting things happening at Lucasfilm. After the Indiana Jones film gets released, after The Acolyte season 1 comes out, well, could be some interesting changes there. That might be an appropriate time to really flush out the whole system.
Yeah.
And it depends on where this film is in development, this Damon Lindelof film, which, a lot of people were asking me when the news broke, hey, what do you think about this new Star Wars film announcement? Now, the Damon Lindelof thing, we had reported on that here on Rebel Force Radio back in March. So that news was floating around out there that he was actually working on Star Wars, or rumored to be working on Star Wars.
Right. But he joined a roster of, half a dozen other creatives that we've rattled off that are supposedly working on Star Wars. So it was just another name at that point.
Right. But it was just his name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we started speculating, well, maybe he's working on the film that Kevin Feige is producing, but that's not the case.
See, I think the Kevin Feige thing is just a pipe dream. This guy is up to his eyeballs in Marvel and the new phase of Marvel and umpteen different live action series. I don't know how anyone dreams this guy is going to have time to put together a Star Wars movie.
Well,
I think it's nuts.
Films exist in development hell in Hollywood for years, if not decades sometimes. So
I think it was to keep the stock price up at Disney. That's what I think it was.
Ooh, that's very scandalous. Swing. But whatever the case is, I mean, his name's been attached to Star Wars for a while. So we were thinking maybe it was the Kevin Feige thing. There's no real development to report on with that. Feige has a writing partner. But as far as we know, that film is as far along as Taika Waititi's film. We know Taika Waititi's very busy. He's off shooting his pirate show. And so all of these things are just in like developmental hell as far as Star Wars goes. And so naturally Disney they're going to say, Kathleen, stop announcing stuff until we have stuff really fully in production. None of these, maybe what ifs. Now, I don't think the Kevin Feige thing has ever been officially announced. As a matter of fact, I know it hasn't.
No, it's never been announced. But Kathleen Kennedy has gone on record. She has responded to questions about a Kevin Feige. Oh, we love Kevin, and Kevin loves Star Wars, and we would just love to have him involved. I think it was one of those types of answers.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, I mean, that's not an announcement, but that's confirmation. That is confirmation. Yeah, she was told to stop announcing stuff, and we haven't heard anything really. I mean, since that last big whoop-de-doo, December 2020.
No,
that was 2 years
very
ago.
Quiet. She's been very quiet. Lastly,
Busy working on the indie film. I mean, really is what I think she's been up to, is a lot of Indiana Jones stuff.
Yes. And finally, just with the rumor, with Rejwan's leaving and rumors of others, there's talk amongst Lucasfilm executives that the strategy there at the company is changing frequently, and there have been a lot of disagreements on which of the creatives have the best vision for the franchise. I'm guessing that there are probably camps developing. I'm sure that there's a Faverau Filoni camp, and there's probably other camps as well. But as far as who there is best to run the show, I don't think you could go wrong with Jon Favreau. I don't see how you could go wrong. If I'm Bob Chapek, and I'm sure the job's been offered to there's no way you can convince me that the job has not been offered to Jon Favreau. Some sort of ultimate. Now, I'm not talking about CEO, because personally, I don't think the CEO of Lucasfilm, I don't think George Lucas hired Kathleen Kennedy to succeed him as president and CEO of Lucasfilm to have any real creative vision. I don't think that was it at all. I think that he knew what Spielberg knew, is that she was a good money person. She managed things well. She was good at logistics, but they weren't looking for her for the next big Star Wars story idea, or not necessarily who should be, for that matter, who should be the next big Star Wars director or something like that. That was what George was going to do. He was going to handle the creative side of things. Guys like Dave Filoni.
He wanted her in there to protect him and facilitate his continued involvement in Star Wars beyond his ownership of the IP. Seemed like a good idea. Unfortunately, I don't think George really discussed that with anyone, I think he just kind of threw the playing pieces on the board and then shook up the board a little bit, as opposed to actually sitting down and playing the game.
I think he wanted her to do the things that George didn't like to do. George doesn't like playing businessman. George wanted to play and make cool stuff. And I think that's what she was really hired there to do, is run the business.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, he does have a president of Lucasfilm too, who was, he had somebody, a CEO running the business. He still does. Well, his same appointment is still there. What's her name? Before her, it was that lady Mish nobody liked. Mish?
Oh, yeah. She was kind of like the COO. Wasn't she the chief operating officer?
Yeah. But I mean, he had people running the company.
Yeah.
And I forget the name of the person who runs it now. But it's not like that all fell on his shoulders, And George was really absentee when it came to running that company, especially around the time he appointed Kathy. But he wanted to restart the film franchise, and he wanted to sell the company. Top priority. George wanted to sell the company, so he knew he had to place someone in there that he could trust. He thought that was Kathy Kennedy, and he had confidence that he'd be able to continue to work on Star Wars beyond the sale, just based on his clout and reputation, and the fact that his hand-chosen successor was in there to make sure that the waters would be smooth for George. Little did he realize, how much a guy like Bob Iger would be involved in the production, and all of his cronies. And that's pretty much what happened, you know. I mean, how it came down to the decision that what George was bringing to the table wasn't fitting the vision of Disney as a corporation or Abrams as a director. All that's really that's the gray area there. We'll probably never know the details of all that.
Yeah.
We've heard Bob Iger regret not communicating better with George at this time.
Right.
I mean, he in his book, he's regretful that he thinks that's a huge mistake he made. And this is a guy who's super powerful, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful guy in Hollywood at the time of that sale.
But he doesn't make any apologies for the decision that they made. It was how they went about it.
Is that how? Yeah, right. So they did not like what George was doing. Clearly, they did not like it. And they didn't see any flexibility with George. So they just went about their own business. And then George just walked out.
They kind of wrote this script like parallel, you know, like here's Kasdan and JJ, wherever they went to, you know, doing long walks and recording their conversations and fleshing out the story. And meanwhile, George thinks that they're working on his idea.
His idea, which was about Anakin's grandchildren. And that just got thrown out the window, and they didn't tell George. They just rewrote the script, and then they FedExed it to him with a Post-it note on it that said, "George, what do you think?" What do I think? Well, number one, I think you guys forgot to call me for these writers' room meetings where you completely revised the entire script.
Oh, man. All right. Well, let's switch gears here and talk about Faverau and Filoni. They talked to Entertainment Tonight at D23 to talk about the future and some of the things that they're working on. This is a certainty, you know. Lindelof, Taika Waititi, Feige, all this is theory. These two guys, they're the real deal. They're making Star Wars as we speak. Right.
And they have multiple projects in the works. I mean, really, these guys are doing their thing. And they're bringing the most competent approach to Star Wars, I think. That's not to dismiss what Tony Gilroy has done with Andor, though. It's just a different approach, you know? And after the conversation we just had about George Lucas, we're going to hear some really good audio from Favs and Filones. And it was Filones? Has that caught on yet? I don't think so. Filones. We got the Favs. Favs, I've heard a lot of people say Favs, but Filones? Yeah, I think that's an RFR exclusive. Yeah. So Filones, because he's got the cajones and he knows how to make good Star Wars. So here they are, and they're talking to Entertainment Tonight at D23. We're just getting this interview now. And there's some really good stuff in here. They give production updates on some of the Star Wars projects they're working on. So our first clip is going to be those guys talking about what's currently happening in the Favs and Filones corner of the Star Wars universe.
We have AHSOKA is filming, often several episodes at once with different directors. Yep. Skeleton Crew, which is John Watts and Chris Ford's show. That's going on several stages. Yeah. So we basically have the whole studio lot.
Mando.
And then Mando, I'm doing editing and visual effects and writing. There are so many different creative nodes that are all sharing with one another, all around this world that George Lucas built. And all of us loving Star Wars and wanting to contribute to that world.
Oh, so he's editing, doing effects, and writing, which means he's already writing the next season of Mandalorian. So, Mandalorian season 4. So that's interesting. That's good news. That's good news.
Yeah, he's deep into it. He's deep into it and working on the visual effects for season 3, which has been fully shot. And the visual effects, he does make a point of saying that. And, you know, Faverau is one of those guys that we talk a lot about him as a director, as a filmmaker, as an actor, as a storyteller, but it often gets forgotten that this is a guy who really helped spearhead the technology being used with the high definition screens that make up the stagecraft volume, where they shoot all of those incredible Mandalorian sequences, and it looks like they're right on location. And that's a big Jon Favreau thing. It really started coming together with him during the first Iron Man film. And then he got deep into the technology when he was making the Lion King live action adaptation and the Jungle Book. And that's really what prepped him for jumping into the world of Star Wars and being able to approach it as not only a filmmaker and a storyteller and an actor, but as a visual effects artist. He gets that.
Yes.
I don't think people recognize that enough about Favreau, about how much time he actually spends on the visual effects end of things.
Well, he was also the one that was encouraging those early days, encouraging the guys that, to use practical models on things like the Razor Crest, and they were building these out of 3D printers in their garages. So he was all over that in those early days of the Mandalorian. So it wasn't just the new fandangled stuff. He's got a great love and appreciation for some of the classic techniques and technology, like the practical stuff.
Yeah, well, having John Knoll around really helps out too.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
built the motion control rig for the Razor Crest in his garage,
right?
So they can make that a live action special effects element. So the geniuses, they're all geniuses. Faverau and Filoni, they have an office right next to each other, which is something I learned.
Huh.
And they do a lot of whiteboarding. Filoni's a good artist. We all know that. But Faverau, he also jumps in and will make crude sketches from time to time. He thinks they're crude sketches. Filoni's like, you're not a bad artist. But there's a brotherhood between these two.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice it. You really notice it. You heard in that last clip that the thing that's fueling Jon Favreau is the same thing that we know firsthand has been fueling Dave Filoni all of these years. And that's the George Lucas approach to making Star Wars and how he set the bar, how he built the foundation. So they are very cognizant of that. They're the anti-Tony Gilroys. Not to say that they're
anti-Tony Gilroy.
They're not anti-Tony Gilroy, but I mean, as much as Tony makes it a priority to keep things like aliens and astromechs out of the focus of the shot, Filoni and Favreau are always thinking, well, what would George do? How would he populate this frame and bring it to life? And they get it. And Filoni talks a little bit about capturing that feeling, capturing the feeling of Star Wars, the feeling that George Lucas established all those years ago.
Star Wars is a great moment that expresses it, is like when Mando looks at Baby Yoda for the first time. That's Star Wars, that feeling. And so while the bigger galaxy and the starships and the space battles and all those things are happening, it's those deep personal connections between characters. So those are the things that you try to replicate, get a feeling of Star Wars. And you're always talking about, how do you expand that galaxy beyond what it was, but keep and maintain the heart of what you saw originally. And to me, the touchstone is always George. I look at George's movies. I look at the things that he was interested in. And I try to fold that into a bit of what I'm doing and what John and I are doing.
Did I just hear him? Did I just hear him call Grogu Baby Yoda?
When Mando looks at Baby Yoda.
Okay, there we go. What? Now I know, Dave. I'm gonna address Dave Filoni directly because I know he listens to Rebel Force Radio, and I know that Baby Yoda mention with Jon Favreau sitting right next to him. That was done for us, folks. That was done for the Baby Yoda. The lovers of that sweet, sweet Baby Yoda. I guarantee you next time Dave Filoni talks about Baby Yoda, he's going to say, sweet Baby Yoda. When Din Djarin looks down at sweet Baby Yoda, I can't wait till that happens. But for now, we got a Baby Yoda in there with Favreau present.
I love it.
I know that Favreau was really pushing back against people calling Grogu Baby Yoda. Well, you're the one who hid the name from us. And the marketing approach of just calling it the child was so flat and dull for a character. So
it really was
vibrant and lovable, like sweet baby Yoda. We had to go with baby Yoda. We're not going to call the child. Oh my God. I heard some of our fellow fan content producers really latching onto that the child thing. And I think it's because they really wanted Lucasfilm to pat themselves on that.
Oh, yes.
Well, Jon Favreau's going to come to my house for Thanksgiving if I call baby Yoda the child. Fail. Dave Filoni sitting right there with Jon Favreau throws out a baby Yoda, a sweet BY, right for us. That was for us.
I love it. I couldn't believe it. Okay, but he also then went on to say that he tries to infuse the things that George loved into his projects. So he's keeping he's keeping the George Lucas spirit alive. There's no question about that. And Dave is, if nothing else, he is loyal to George's original vision. That's for sure.
And so Favs throws down with appreciation for George Lucas. Filones throws down with appreciation for George Lucas. This isn't the stuff we've been reading in Tony Gilroy interviews or even J.J. Abrams interviews or any of those guys. You know, maybe Ron Howard gave shout out to George Lucas here and there. I'm sure he did. But these guys, they really understand that that's the foundation and that's the gospel, and they want to continue to respect that. And both of them are talking the talk and walking the walk the same way. They're walking in step as far as preserving the George Lucas touch as best as they can, as best as they can. So I really appreciate that. I'm, of course, looking forward to the AHSOKA series. I'm looking forward to Mandalorian Season 3. I'm looking forward to John Watts' Skeleton Crew. And Faverau and Filoni talk a little bit about how that came about. How did that become a thing?
Skeleton Crew is great because it was me and John Watts when we're on the set of Spider-Man. I was just sort of sniffing out if it's something he might be into doing. He's like, I have a whole idea for what I would do. And we were just talking on the set, and then I called Dave I was out in Atlanta. I was like, Dave, this sounds really good. You want to listen to this idea? That sounded good. We hopped on a Zoom call. They pitched through what it was, just the very basic strokes. I was like, this is great. It focused on young people. It's always good to have new characters coming in. And there are so many different tones now in Star Wars. You have Andor that, is intrigue and a thriller, You have adventure. You have with the Mandalorian, samurai adventure with Ahsoka. So to have this young Amblin feeling movie with young people seeing it for the first time, who grew up in the Star Wars world and are exposed to adventure, the puppets, the costumes, the visuals, the world that's being expanded upon. And now I get to write the next season of Mandalorian with all these new characters and new locations and new creatures. So it just keeps adding more and more. And so there's this cohesive group of stories that are being told thanks to all these filmmakers that are contributing.
Wow. That's probably been one of the projects that I've been the most, I guess, in the dark about. I don't have a lot of expectations about it other than, of course, now hearing how enthusiastic Favs and Filones are about it. I am as well, but it seemed to come out of nowhere. We knew about all these other shows, and then, we saw logos for all of them. And then all of a sudden this Skeleton Crew thing bursts through. It sounds interesting.
Star Wars Celebration. Yeah, we didn't hear about it until Star Wars Celebration.
Right.
Who? What? What is this? What? Bunch of 12-year-olds in space with Jude Law? Oh, that's going to suck. Oh, wait. They said it's not just a kiddie show.
Yeah.
Oh, John Hamm. Oh, not John Hamm. What's the guy's name? John Hamm's the actor. The director of this thing is from the Spider-Man guy.
Yeah.
John Watts is directing. John Watts is directing from Spider-Man. Okay. All right. Now we're talking about something here.
Yeah.
How is this going to play out? What? Oh, people are saying Stranger Things in the Star Wars universe. Okay. All right. Well, maybe we're on to something here. So Skeleton Crew might be that one. It'll show up next year along with Mando Season 2 and The Acolyte. That's what we can look forward to is for 2023 Star Wars. We know it ain't going to be in the theaters. But we have those 3 series coming and Bad Batch. So let's not forget our animated good times. And I'm looking forward to this. I did like the Spider-Man trilogy with the one that just recently wrapped up. I thought those films were all real good. John Watts was a part of that. He had Faverau on the set there, and Faverau playing Iron Man's buddy. What's that guy's name? He has come on, Swank. You know, his buddy.
Oh,
Slappy,
yes.
Happy.
Yes, Happy. Who's not so happy because of Aunt May and
that's right. He was with Marissa Tomei.
He was.
So, I mean, wow. What a great time they're having on the set. Now they're breaking these Star Wars stories. And so fantastic time with Slappy and Watts and John Hamm. What kind of world is going on in my head?
John.
That's John Watts, John Hamm. They get mixed up in my head.
They pretty much go together there.
The mayhem, unleashing the tornado of activity that goes on in my head. That's gonna be worth looking forward to. Faverau and Filoni, Favs and Flones. These guys, they're the real heart of Star Wars, the heart and soul of Star Wars. Not to say that like a thing like Tony Gilroy's show isn't one of the best shows on TV, because it is. And I am really excited about that. But maintaining the integrity of Star Wars is something that I think is really important. And George ain't around to do it no more. So Faverau and Filoni, they'll take up the mantle and stuff. And yeah, there's room for different kind of Star Wars shows.
Of course, yes.
There definitely is. But every time it happens, it's an experiment. Let's just keep that in mind. Now, we might not be saying that Andor season 2, because we'll be used to it. It'll be established. We'll be locked into it. We'll see the beginning of the season of Andor season 2, and we'll be feeling nostalgic for season 1. I mean, that's the insanity of being a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
So, yeah, you got to keep open mind about all that stuff.
And I, for one, am glad that they got season 1 and season 2 all lined up at the beginning of the deal with Gilroy. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that we're not beholden to ratings and the streaming numbers in order to justify a season 2, because obviously it wouldn't happen. It is likely that if that would have been the barometer, that it wouldn't have happened based on the numbers. I do think that this is a show that is going to grow in popularity over the years. As I said, it's great that it's going to be there in a timeless way for the fans as they get older, those that might be too young to really appreciate it. And for those, some of those latecomers that, some of these people are just now discovering the Clone Wars, or they just discovered the Clone Wars when it hit Netflix and they weren't watching when it was on Cartoon Network. So it's great that these things are out there and available for people to grab when they're ready, and then they sort of take on a new life.
Yeah, you can nitpick it all you want and say there aren't Greedos, there aren't droids, there's no lightsabers, no Jedi, but you can do that all you want, but you can't deny the fact that it's a great show, and it's expertly executed, and it's doing exactly what it wants to do. So that's the thing, I have confidence in it. I have confidence in Andor. Whereas other Star Wars projects, especially projects over the last 7-8 years, while they may be steeped in all the Star Wars aesthetic that I love, like Jedi, lightsabers, aliens, and droids, it doesn't provide the amount of confidence that I get when I'm sitting through an episode of Andor. And the confidence that I have in the filmmakers, the confidence I have in the actors, the writers, the confidence I have in the potential for the story to actually go someplace and provide us with a complete
and go someplace unexpected,
fulfilling story. Maybe. Yeah. Well, so far Andor has been totally unexpected. Everything about it has been unexpected because it's been that different. But season 2 won't be the experiment. Season 2 will remind us of all the things we liked about season 1.
Right.
It'll be like, oh, I'm nostalgic for Andor. And then people will start talking about, oh, that was Ham, the prisoner from he was there at the labor camp. They had him in there. That was fan service when they brought him back.
Oh, no.
Wait a second. We're talking fan service with Andor now? Well, that's the natural cycle.
It's about time we get an Olaf Black Series figure, for crying out loud. I want him on a vintage card. All right. Before we wrap up this week, we do want to congratulate Hayden Christensen, and not just Hayden Christensen. So the Saturn Awards were held recently, and it was the 50th anniversary of the event presented by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. This goes all the way back to 1972. Star Wars walked away with 5 trophies. That's right. In addition to Hayden Christensen winning as Best Guest Starring Performance, Kenobi walked away with the honors for Best Limited Event Streaming Series. Moses Ingram won Best Supporting Actress. Ewan McGregor was nominated for Best Actor, and Vivian Lyra Blair was nominated for Best Performance by a Younger Actor. Neither one of them won. Ironically, Ewan McGregor was beat out by Star Wars alum Oscar Isaac. That's right. Poe Dameron beat him out. Oscar winning for Moon Knight.
Poe Dameron beat Obi-Wan
Kenobi.
Yikes.
Yeah. Rosario Dawson was nominated for the same award that Hayden Christensen won. So that's right. Sky Guy beat Snips. Rosario Dawson loses to Hayden Christensen for her turn as Ahsoka in Book of Boba Fett. Also, congratulations to Ming-Na Wen, who won Best Actress for Book of Boba Fett. Bad Batch with an upset victory as Best Animated TV Series. But Book of Boba Fett was also nominated for Best Limited Streaming Series as well. So a lot of nominations and a lot of awards. But Jim, the one that I think feels the sweetest to a lot of us is Hayden Christensen. Hayden taking home an award for playing Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader is just it's just a very fitting little bow on his career as a Star Wars actor.
Right. All the animosity he had to soak in during the prequel trilogy and just the fact that his career really stalled out as far as being a big time movie star, which, everyone assumed whoever was going to play Anakin Skywalker, that was going to jumpstart their career and make them the next Clark Gable, but it didn't really happen that way for Hayden. His career, as far as a cinema star, kind of went the way of Mark Hamill's in many ways, where he was just looked at as one character only, and he had to shoulder that burden for the rest of his career. Hamill did. I mean, he was able to maintain by doing stage and voice work and stuff, but it wasn't really until he came back in the Star Wars sequels where he started getting on-screen roles again.
Right.
And which is great for Mark. I mean, fantastic. Anytime I hear about Mark Hamill being cast in this or that, I just maybe I won't ever even see the movie. I don't care, but just
it just makes you happy, right? That
he's had the renaissance in his career, and with Hayden winning the Saturn Award, granted it is a sci-fi award,
right?
This award show seems to be tailored to be the one where Star Wars can actually win stuff,
which means I'm more likely to seek it out next year and watch the damn thing because screw the Oscars. No movie or TV show that I watch is going to win an Emmy or an Oscar.
And Star Wars always traditionally won things for like visual audio effects or costuming, things like that, makeup, but never the real meaty ones, and here's Hayden. He's up there winning Best Supporting Actor at the Saturn Awards. And so it is very sweet to see that. And maybe his appearance in the Kenobi show will do something to provide a renaissance to his career, much like Mark Hamill has seen over the past 7 or 8 years since he came back on the scene as Luke. And so good for Hayden. We have his speech we have his speech. It's largely a bunch of shout outs, name dropping, thank yous and stuff, as these speeches typically are. But it's a good idea for us to put Hayden in the spotlight here and listen to his acceptance speech as Best Supporting Actor in the 2022 Saturn Awards for his work on Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Such an amazing experience getting to come back to Star Wars, and this is the icing on the cake. I know it's late, so I'll try to make this quick, but there are a few people I'd like to thank, and I'll start with two that unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. Our director, Deborah Chow, who's just amazing, so thank you, Deb. And Ewan McGregor. This is because of Obi-Wan, so thank you, Ewan. I want to thank my friend Joby Harold for writing one of the most perfect scenes ever, and I share this with you. I'll keep it at my place, though. I want to thank Michelle Rejwan for so warmly welcoming me back, and of course Kathleen Kennedy too. Thank you both. I want to thank Lynn Hale,
applause for Kathleen.
Really everyone at Lucasfilm for all their support. And certainly everyone who worked on this show. It was such a pleasure. And I want to thank Robin Gerland, who originally cast me in Star Wars. And of course, I got to thank George Lucas. So thank you all.
Little shout out to GL.
Yeah, more in the George Lucas Appreciation Society.
Love it.
I heard you mention no round of applause for Kathy Kennedy when you mentioned, but I think it's because Michelle was there at the event.
Is that why?
Why she got the round?
Ewan McGregor wasn't there, and he got applause.
Well, but he is Ewan McGregor's son.
That's true. That's true. All right, that's going to wrap things up for us this week on Rebel Force Radio. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. It's always a pleasure to get together and talk the wars, whether it be a live after show or the Rebel Force Radio podcast. We appreciate it very, very much. We also appreciate our sponsor this week, MeUndies. Thank you, MeUndies, for your support of Rebel Force Radio. We want to especially thank our Rebel Force Radio Patreon supporters. Oh, yeah. You thought this was it? No, you're just scratching the surface if you're listening to this. You want to go over to rebelforceradio.com, click on the Patreon banner, or go to patreon.com/rebelforceradio, become a supporter of our podcast exploits here, and you will not just get weekly full show video. That's right, the podcast you're listening to right now, you could actually watch if you want to. No, of course you want to. You want to see us. You want to see what goes on in the making of this show. You can get that, but you can also get exclusive podcasts that you can't subscribe to on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anything like that. No, you can't get RFR Q&A or the Babu Freaks or Clone Wars Declassified Remastered or the Filoni Files or any of the archive highlights that are found in the members-only area over there. You can only get those when you become a member of the RFR Patreon group, those supporters. Also, when you call into the live shows, we try to get you right to the head of the line so you don't have to wait as long as all those other people when you call in and want to offer your comments. It really is just a fabulous community of some of the best Star Wars fans in the galaxy. So please check out those details at patreon.com/rebelforceradio. Also, you can see and hear more RFR on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/rebelforceradio. Classic interviews, parodies, and bits, the latest live streams, and so much more. All that, including new full show audio. So it's one of the first places that you can hear the brand new Rebel Force Radio episode as it drops. So please like and subscribe today. We know by the numbers, the undisputed number one Star Wars podcast on the planet. That's right, number one. We'd like to be a high-ranking YouTube channel as well. So I know some of you out there, you've been listening to us for 15 years. You go, I don't need the YouTube. I have you right here on my iPod. I know you're still listening on an iPod. That's fine. It's fine. But check us out over on YouTube. It would sure help us out a lot. We appreciate it. If you want to chat with us in between shows, you can send us an email, show@rebelforceradio.com, or the voicemail line 708-320-1RFR. That's 708-320-1737. We're on all of the social platforms. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. When we do go live, it's a great way to find out. We get those posts out. We let you know earlier in the day and then right as we're going live so that you don't have to miss one of our live shows. But above all, if you want to help us out, the best way to do it is just spread the word. Tell other Star Wars fans in your life about Rebel Force Radio. If you're around the water cooler and you're talking about the latest episode of Andor or Tales of the Jedi, say, have you ever listened to Rebel Force Radio? No, what's Rebel Force Radio? It's the best podcast in the galaxy. Let them know. Tell them they got to check it out. We are streaming 24/7 at all the podcatchers, the best podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Audible, Pandora, Samsung, anywhere you can find podcasts, you'll find us here at RFR. You'll also find us here next week. Don't forget, we'll be looking at episode 10 of Andor live Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Be there. Watch the episode and then hang out with us. All right, we'll see you next time. Love you all so much. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
And I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
with you, always. The Force will be with you, always.
So nice, had to say it twice.
You want some Jawa juice?